Hello, Bookstew viewers and listeners. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to an author who is new to me, but who I'm very glad I have discovered. She's local. Her name is Clea Simon, and she's written, get this, 34 books. Okay, so how could I not be familiar with her? Clea primarily writes what we think of as cozy mysteries, which I think is kind of a misnomer because it probably shuts off or turns off men who might think it's demasculinizing to be associated with cozy, but I think they are usually less violent, more, maybe a little bit more domestic. So Clea, welcome to Bookstew.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk about all your prolific output first. So I'm going to tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about them. So you are an author of three series, and the first, or one of them, is called the Theta Krakow books. And I had to put the titles in because they're all wonderful cat puns and very clever. So the titles are Mew is for Murder, Cattery Row, Cries and Whiskers, and Probable Clause. Did you think of these?
I am afraid I am an inveterate punner.
Oh
Yes.
my
Yes, I
goodness.
love a good pun.
So
So
there is a show, I don't know if it's here at all. It's in New York. It's like called Punorama, where it's like a game show with puns. So I think I would back
sign me
you.
up.
I would back you for that. And then you have a series of 10 books, which feature Dulcie Schwartz, who is a grad student whose deceased cat helps her solve mysteries. And all of the 10 books have the word gray in the title, which I think is pretty remarkable. And then you have the Prue Marlowe books, 7 of those, that feature an animal psychic. So those are your main series. Then you have some standalones, some smaller sets of smaller series. Can you tell us how you're really the first author I've ever had on who has produced series and so many of them? Can you tell us about how series come about? Because you also have standalones.
I have several standalones. I also have one series I guess you're not aware of. My current ongoing series is called The Witch Cats of Cambridge, that feature
Oh,
a young woman who really desperately wants to be a witch, and living in Cambridge, she that kind of culture exists. She's Wiccan, but the truth is, it's her three cats who have the power, and those are a spell of murder, um, a spell of murder, an incantation of cats, a cat on the case, and wow, I can't think of the name of the last one. But there's a new one of that coming out this autumn. That's going to be the Cat's Eye Sapphire. Excuse me, the Cat's Eye
oh,
Chain. We just changed the title. So that's my fourth series. But as for writing series, I sort of try to alternate now between. I started off writing more of the cozies, which are sort of warm, gentle mysteries. The line about cozies is usually the blood is dry before it hits the page, and they don't have any overt sex or violence, but they're sort of puzzle mysteries, and they're designed to make you feel good. They're designed to make you feel like, okay, life has been disordered, but life is righted by the end. But I alternate those with my standalones, which tend to be much darker. You could say in some ways they're more realistic. Who knows? But the difference between them is with the cozies, I get to sort of continue in this world, which I love as well. I mean, I feel very affectionate towards my characters. I actually just finished sending back the revision. I just finished the revisions of the Cat's Eye Charm, and I was reading it through one more time because you read these through a million times. And at the end of it, I sort of burst. I burst into tears. My husband looked
oh.
over and he was a little concerned. But that's how I feel when I finish my cozies, and it's a good cry, you know. Um, and so I love writing those because it's the world I want to inhabit. But then I write books like The Butterfly Trap or Bad Boy Beat or Hold Me Down because maybe in some way that's the world I really inhabit.
So, how does it work to intersperse series with standalones? I mean, do you wake up one morning with an idea and then you sort through it and you say, would this fit better into a series or would it be a better standalone?
I'm afraid it's more prosaic than that. The series tend to be contracted. So it's like, okay, I have a book due. I have a first draft due in, or I have a book due in, say, March. So that means I have to have a first draft due by November so that I have time to thoroughly revise it. And that's before it even goes for edits. The darker books tend to, yes, as you suggested, they just come from ideas. Like the butterfly trap came because I was thinking about this morning. A friend was in a relationship that was falling apart, and he was, talking it through with me. And we're sitting at my kitchen table, and he ended up crying, and I ended up hugging him, and it resolved unhappily, but it resolved. But when he was gone, I realized that in some ways his relationship reminded me of my parents' relationship, and which nobody was murdered in my parents' relationship, but there were these weird inequities. I'm sort of jumping the gun on the butterfly trap, but my father adored my mother, but I don't think he ever really saw her for who she is, or who she was, I should say. And I just realized I wanted to explore that. I wanted to set that in today, with the same kind of inequities and just see how it would play out.
All right,
And
well,
that's
then,
how darker books happen.
since you launched into the butterfly trap, why don't you do a little reading for us and then we'll talk about the book some more.
Sure, thank you. So this is, I'm sort of skipping around a tiny bit, but this is the opening of the butterfly trap. And this will give you an idea of, well, one of the viewpoints. The butterfly trap, as you know, is told from two points of view. First, you get the man's point of view, and then it flips over and you get the woman's point of view, and you discover that maybe they're not really on the same page, shall we say. But I'll start on this. So this is from the butterfly trap. She was, without a doubt, the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Not just her face, those wide blue eyes, clear as cobalt chloride, but the way she moved. She was dancing when he first saw her, that long black hair swinging just a little behind her, like an afterimage, a visual echo. The movement taken up by the wide sleeves of her shirt, blue but paler than her eyes, some kind of flimsy fabric, a gauzy hippie thing that would be tacky on anyone else, but not on her. He could have watched her dance all night. You gonna talk to her? His buddy, Pete, coming up behind him. The music was loud and Pete was close, his breath boozy and warm. Come on, it's a party. Make your move. I can't. Didn't want to, really. Simply watching her was good for what ailed him. The lack of beauty, the lack of magic in his life. Besides, she was out of his league. He was a smart guy. He knew that much. Greg, don't be a pussy. For Pete, these things were easy. You wanted something, you reached out and took it. That's why Pete had that fellowship. Why he and Marnie had been seeing each other for months. Marnie way above Pete's wiry, wonky self. And Jesse, the lab co-op, too. Greg was pretty sure. Pete wouldn't brag outright, not to Greg, but he'd seen the looks. He knew how Pete operated. But Pete wasn't getting her, not this time. Only as he drew closer, she turned away. She didn't see him. Of course she didn't. And he'd begun to slink away defeated when he realized what was happening. The way she was spinning, her eyes closed, brought her up to a low coffee table, a mess of cans and an ashtray, all of which went flying as she tripped and started to fall, eyes shocked open, her mouth an O of surprise. He was there to catch her, his moment, his chance. Only her fall was broken with a jerk and she cried out, doubling over in pain. She landed awkwardly in his arms, turned away, so that he had a mouthful of her hair. Through the black silk, he followed her gaze as she raised her hand. It was red, covered in blood, slick and glossy, and she cried out again, as much in surprise as in pain. Your foot, years of training. Here, let me see. She turned toward him then, eyes wide, as he lowered her to the floor. People were crowding close, but he was in his element. Give us some room, he commanded. Get me some gauze or a clean towel. I'm a doctor, he said to her, putting 8 years of assurance more in his voice. She nodded ever so slightly and let him take her foot. Sure enough, a piece of glass, that ashtray, someone's bottle, protruded from her heel. The floor, her feet were wet, spreading the blood, making the wound look worse than it was, but still. Take a breath. She did, and he pulled the shard out. Blood welled after it, a scarlet bloom. But by then someone was holding out a dish towel. Clean enough for now, and he pressed it hard against her heel. Gauze, doctor? Pete, the mockery in his voice muted, and Greg reached up to take the gauze, the tape, to properly bandage the wound. Thanks, acknowledging the assistance, both with the wound and with the girl. There we go. The cut wasn't large, and she was already trying to get up. Drunk still, he figured, the fright worse than the pain. She had blood on her jaw, an anxious handprint on her cheek. The red only set off her blue eyes, wide with the shock of it all. The pallor of her cheek. But he was there, beside her. He propped her up, so warm in his arms. Those blue eyes blinked up at him. I've got you, he said. So I hope that sets up the relationship between Greg, a doctor, and this beautiful, mysterious creature.
And
who, as he said,
his
thing he'd never seen.
And his hound like Buddy Pete, who figures into
Yes.
the story as well. So when I was reading it, I was thinking about the dual point of views and how they're, the way people handle points of view is always, I'm sure the writers trying to choose how they think to best present dual points of view. Sometimes they alternate chapters. You made the decision, or you and your editor made the decision, to make two completely separate narratives. And it made me think of one of my favorite books, Lauren Groff's Fates and Furies from 2015. But there was a difference there. In Lauren's book, the first section was told from the husband's point of view, but it was not labeled with his name. So when you went into the narrative, you just thought it was a story of a marriage. And then you get to a certain number of pages and chapter 2, and you flip it open, and it's from the wife's point of view, which was completely shocking and surprising. But you deliberately labeled the narratives with Greg's name and Anya's name, and you put Greg first. Was that to kind of hold on to the mystery? How did that decision come about how to present the two separate points of view?
Well, and I love Lauren Groff, and she's just a fantastic writer. But I actually modeled it on Henry James's The Golden Bowl, which is a story of a love triangle. And first you get one point of view, and your sympathy is totally engaged, and you just believe in these characters. But then it flips around, and you see that something else is happening entirely. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to give you the complete narrative from one point of view, because I wanted you, in this case it's Greg, for the first one, I wanted you to see everything from Greg's point of view. And I wanted you to sympathize with him and understand where he was coming from. But then I wanted to show you that the same facts, and there are some things that they both see together, some scenes that are sort of repeated from the different side, may mean something entirely different to a different person. So that ideally by the end of the book, you could say a more complete point of view, or at least a more complex point of view. It was my editor's idea to label them, but I wrote this without an editor in mind. I wrote this and then it went out on submission. So this was totally me. But yeah, I wanted to totally engage you. I didn't want a back and forth. I wanted you to utterly believe in Greg and his viewpoint and his take on the world. And then I wanted you to see, well, maybe not. By the end, it's a question of who do you sympathize with?
I thought it was very, very effective. And Greg, to me, I wonder if a man reading it versus me reading it would feel differently. I have had experience with men who their demeanor, their looks, their personality are kind of maybe subdued. They're a little shy, and yet they are attracted to gorgeous, seemingly perfect women who are, like he says at several points in the book, she's like, I don't deserve her. She's beyond me. She's better than me. How would I ever deserve a woman like that? But yet they pursue them. So, in the back of their heads, they're going, oh, I'm not in her league. But that doesn't stop them from from falling in love basically because of the way they look, which is, and because of the idea that they like to have a woman like that on their arm, you know. So his motivation to me was, it was just sad. I mean, he was a doctor. He had, you know, he was doing well in his career, and then all of a sudden she appears, and you can tell this is going to be an obsessive love story, but you can even sense from how he describes their interaction that she's not feeling the same way. So let's talk about Anya, the character, because I thought you explained where she comes from beautifully, and the artist's life she's living in Boston. So let's talk about that.
Well, I wouldn't say obsessive. I'd say he's insecure and he's smitten. And I do think that this is a fairly common thing. One male friend of mine said it was the most cynical take on heterosexual relationships he's read since Gone Girl. So that's one male take on it. Uh, and he's a dear friend, but he is divorced and remarried, so perhaps he knows something of this. But Anya is a woman who is, she's got her own backstory. She's got her own history, as of course any adult person does at this point. But she also has her own dreams and goals. And Greg's are, now that now that Greg has achieved professional success, or he's on the cusp of achieving professional success, he sees the rest of it as just sort of falling into place. He wants to have a wife, he wants to have kids, he wants to have a house in the suburbs. She has very different goals. She's an artist. She's seeking some kind of achievement that maybe he can't understand. It's funny, one thing that I wrote, and I don't think any critic has brought it up, but the first thing he says is, she's the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She's not a thing, she's a person. And that is sort of Greg's great weakness. He sees her as this beautiful, mysterious thing, and he idolizes her, but maybe he doesn't see her as a person.
And that was my thought, that you know, and it in its bitterest form, it leads to being an incel, where, you know, oh, she won't, you know, I pursued this beautiful butterfly, she didn't want, she what didn't want me, so now she's evil, and she's only wants the good looking Brad, Robert Redford, I must pay tribute, guys. And he also indicated that part of his pursuit of her would be that he would enable her to pursue her artistic dreams. He would,
Yes, yes.
his financial support, his emotional support would help her succeed as an artist. But he really had no interest in her art at all, didn't like most of it, found it disturbing when it wasn't like pretty and flowery with nice colors. But she was living in an artist collective that saw things very differently. So I would like you to explain about how the artist collective worked, and if there's any experience you had that made you portray that so beautifully.
Yes, sure. First of all, my mother was an artist, and my father was a physician, so that's the tie in there.
Oh,
But yes, I have several friends who are visual artists. Excuse me. And there is an artist collective fairly near where I live that I sort of was thinking of, where everybody is supportive and friendly, and you know, they get together for holidays. But at the same level, you know, there's also this competition going on. So and so got a grant, so and so got a gallery show. How'd they get that? Why am I not getting that? And you know, there's this tension, and it is in a way a different world, in that the values are not, you know, how much money you made, or your status, really. Money is just what enables you to pay the rent and buy supplies. It's really about, you know, what are you achieving in your art? Are you breaking through to the next level? Are you getting recognized? It's like, yes, people will be jealous if you get written up in arts news, but you know, just because that's recognition. And it's almost like a cross between a college dorm and a family, but it's focused on creation. That's the one thing everyone has in common. And it tends to be, they tend to be a very collegial group. I mean, as I said, they do holidays together. They have garden parties together in their little courtyard. And that's something that Greg who, we get a little bit of backstory on both these characters. His family life was not very warm. I mean, neither was Anya's, but Anya has found this family. And Greg, in some ways, doesn't understand it. And yes, he's trying. He does see that his role can be to free her from worrying about money, that he can, buy her all these things. But it's like he gets the big picture, but he doesn't understand the detail.
That's true. And so, I think there's a definite mismatch, but each of them is using them for their own using each other for their own gratification. And, those type of situations, I would say, end up badly most of the time. So I'm not going to give any hints as to the resolution because I thought you asked me while we were speaking before the taping of the show, did I see several incidents ahead of time? Like, did I know about them? Did I anticipate them coming? I'm bad at mysteries. I don't usually figure them out. But there were a few surprises in here that I thought were very well done. Maybe a tiny bit of foreshadowing, but I love it when mysteries surprise me because I always feel sad when I'm reading reviews, because I do write book reviews for our local paper, and people write, "Oh, I saw that coming from the page 2." First of all, I think they're lying most of the time, but also most of the pleasure of a mystery to me is being fooled and being deceived and then enjoying like the denouement. So I think you did that very, very well in The Butterfly Trap. And I have one more question for you before we run out of time. So I saw that you described your books as psychological suspense, which is a description I had never heard because I generally use like domestic thriller or something like that. Did you invent that? I haven't heard any genre described as that, and I think it's a great one. What do you think?
Thank you. I did not invent it, and I do think that Butterfly Trap serves as a domestic thriller because it really is a story of a couple. But my books, I do want you to have the surprises, but it's really about the psychology of the characters. It's as you get to know them. Um, that's where the suspense comes from. It's like, what will they do? And I want everything they do to make sense, even if it surprises you. Like you'll go, "Oh my God, I didn't see that coming." But of course. That to me is the definition of psychological suspense. So I'm hoping the Butterfly Trap fits that, where you go, of course.
It certainly did, and at the end. So I mean, I like that description because I think domestic thriller, Gone Girl that genre probably existed before. I love Gone Girl and both the book and the movie. And I thought they were wonderful, and I liked that it kicked off really I'm sure people wrote these type of books before, but I like when things can be defined. Like if I go into a bookstore and there's, a section, the section is usually like it's called mysteries or I would love to see a section that was called psychological suspense. That would draw me right to it. So
you have all my books in there.
Bookstores, if you're listening, use it. So I have to thank you for defining that, Clea, and for writing this really enjoyable, no matter what we call it, we'll call it, mystery. And also I will look into some of your standalones and your series, and I hope that viewers and listeners will as well. So thank you for joining me on Book Stew today.
Thank you so much for having me on Book Stew today.
Thanks, and have a good night. Okay,
You
viewers and listeners, I'm going to put a list up at the end of the episode so you can see the series and maybe some pictures of some of the good covers. So I hope you enjoyed meeting Clea and hearing about the philosophy behind series versus standalones. Have a good night.